Jay McInerney's 1984 debut, Bright Lights, Big City, explored the fast life in New York City and captured an era. Like most overnight sensations, he had been hard at work for years before he broke out. He chronicled the excess of the 1980s and led a lifestyle that rivals some of his own characters. He was called the most celebrated writer under 40 in America by Vanity Fair magazine. He joins me now to talk about life after 40 and writing at the dawn of a new century, and I'm pleased to have him here. Welcome back.
Thank you, Charlie.
Let me talk about this book and then put some of the stuff in context. It's about time you and I have a conversation about how you see yourself. You are now the proud father of twins.
Yeah.
You are now living part-time in Tennessee and part-time here, and now you've just published The Last of the Savages, Patrick Keene and Will Savage, two young men who are friends from very different places in life. Tell me what this book is for you, a story of what?
Well, in the most basic level, it's a story of a friendship. A seemingly unlikely friendship, but then I think most interesting friendships are unlikely, you know. And the main character really is Will Savage, who is the firstborn son of a wealthy family from Memphis, Tennessee. He rebels against his background. He wants to basically tear down the social order. He grew up sneaking out of the house, going to Beale Street to listen to blues, soul, black music, and this becomes his primary passion in life. He finds himself rooming at a New England boarding school with Patrick Keene, who's a lower middle class Irish Catholic scholarship kid who wants to join the same social order that Will is tearing down. Now, the book is partly about the question of who won that war in the 60s. You know, there was essentially there was this tremendous social upheaval. There was a kind of allegedly a Dionysian revolution, and you know, just recently I've seen Janis Joplin on television selling Mercedes-Benzes from the dead. The book is about that question. You know, who won that war? And I think as someone who grew up wanting to be part of the 60s and just missing out, it's partly about my fascination with that period. And
so you wrote it in
my 60s envy.
Yeah, it was 60s envy, was it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I felt like I wanted to.
I didn't have 60s envy because I was right in the middle of it.
You know, I wanted to.
I began school in 1960.
I wanted to go to college and buy a Volkswagen bus and sleep with hippie chicks, and by the time I turned 17, it was pretty much all over.
Yeah.
You know? It was the Nixon era. So.
Why The Last of the Savages as a title?
Well, on one level, it's the name of Will's family. On the other hand, I think it is almost literally about the end of this particular dynasty, and also clearly the name wasn't randomly chosen. Will is a kind of Rousseauvian natural man. He's a kind of he's a wild man. He's one of those really bad boys who who manages to stamp his excesses and his passions onto a larger historical canvas.
Tell me what it's like for you, this young man who came here and to know something about your life, and you must be tired of hearing the chronicling I just did. You were the most celebrated writer of the 80s, and some people called a definer of the 80s, and all of that. And in 1984, when Bright Lights hit, it was a big success, and you became the most celebrated. I sometimes wonder whether it happened to Norma Mailer too in another time, whether it is good to hit so big like that, because our expectations for you became very high.
Honestly, it's not necessarily good. I don't think it's necessarily good on a personal level. The kind of success that I experienced after the publication of Bright Lights, Big City was overwhelming, and I had very modest expectations. My publisher had very modest expectations. We had a very small print run. We were caught totally by surprise when the book sold out of its first printing after about a month. It almost died at that point because it took more than a month to get it back in the bookstores. I did not expect to become an alleged spokesman for my or any generation.
Are you uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely, because I don't pretend to speak for anybody but myself, and I'm happy if my interests coincide with with those of many people of my generation, particularly the reading public. But you know, I think I'm a chronicler of a certain generation. I don't propose to be a leader. And on another level, it's difficult because I feel that I have to atone for the success of that book. I mean, I think some people haven't forgiven me for the success of Bright Lights, Big City, as if it were something unseemly. And in the literary world, there is a sense that serious literary endeavor does not coincide with the popular taste. In those ways, that kind of overnight success, that kind of big success in the book world, was difficult. And I feel very happy to have it somewhat behind me. You know, I don't miss those days of 1986 when my picture was in almost every magazine, and every gossip column in New York.
When you have twins too, you grow up very fast, or you don't. You're in a different place, I assume.
Yeah, if nothing else does, that kind of terminates your adolescence.
But here's what I want to get at, and I've never seen you talk about this on television, and I've never talked to you about it, and I want to talk to you about it tonight. It is the notion of what critics say, and whether you think part of that is somehow linked to what your image is, and so that when the reviews I've read of this book have not been great, haven't been good, and you've been kicked on this book, and I wonder, and I haven't read them all, but whether you think it is fair, whether it is somehow a reflection of something beyond the merits of the book or not. Are they reviewing Jay McInerney, or are they reviewing the book, or both?
Naturally, I think it's a reflection of something beyond the merits of the book, and no, I don't think it's fair. At this point, we're talking about the New York reviews, I have to say, because everything that isn't New York has been very favorable so far. But yeah, I've been trashed in several of the usual places. I mean, the New York Times, their lead reviewer has trashed every single book I've ever written, starting with Bright Lights, Big City. So it's almost become a ritual, waiting for her to come out with her hatchet. Although I think at this point there's almost a conflict of interest, because we have addressed each other in print in somewhat hostile terms now, and so if I were her, I might recuse myself. But that's one case. Yeah, I do feel from those reviews that I've read that I'm still being reviewed, that the early success is being reviewed, that my image is being reviewed, and that I'm still, unfortunately, kind of a symbol, as much as I'm a living, producing author. I think I represent perhaps some of the excesses of the 80s for some people. Maybe there's a feeling that I got too much too fast, and there seems to be a pretty nasty personal note in a lot of these reviews that I wish I could say it surprises me, but it does surprise me a little at this relatively late date. I mean, I'm 41 years old now. I spend half my year out of town, and it doesn't seem to me that I'm bothering anybody in a conspicuous way, or taking food out of anyone's mouth. And yeah, sometimes the vituperation seems extreme to me.
Raymond Carver said to you, the best lesson I can ever tell you is to write every day. Get up every day and make sure you commit black to white.
Yeah, that's something I remember. I mean, I usually take Sundays off, but yeah, I write almost every day, and I feel really lousy if I don't.
Does it get harder or easier?
Sometimes, I think each book is different. This book was harder to write than some because I was really trying to stretch a little bit. This is the first book I've written that isn't, in some sense, the story of my life. There comes a point...
Some of it's autobiographical, isn't it?
Well, I didn't...
None of it.
I wouldn't say none of it, but this is about two guys who are 6, 7 years older than I am. I didn't live through all of this period, and I am neither a rock and roll mogul nor a repressed, anal retentive lawyer. On the other hand, there's a sense in which...
Will in the first entrance and Patrick in the second.
But I suppose there's a sense in which I identify with both of those characters. It was the first book, though, that I sort of stopped mining my immediate experience in New York as a young adult and tried to stretch out farther into my own imagination.
Tell me how marriage has changed you, in a sense. I mean, this marriage, this woman. Because you have acknowledged in print, it's made all the difference in the way you see yourself and see your life.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, it's more complex than just settling you down. It's centering. It's what?
It is more complex. Well, I think I was always out there looking around the world, and I was always restless. And it's very gratifying not to have that restless feeling of wondering where you're going to end up, because I feel like I know where I'm going to end up. I've gotten it wrong before, though. This is my third marriage, not widely known fact. The first one I kind of swept under the rug for a while, but I think that's the definition of a romantic is.
In the first one, she went to Europe and never came back, or something. Is it?
Yeah, she was a model, and she ran off with a photographer. Yeah. Much to my chagrin at the time. Although I'm very grateful to her now. But I don't know if you have, if you have the right person in your life, then waking up to a few bad reviews doesn't really throw you off for very long. Speaking of reviews, I think of something Kingsley Amis said. He said, a bad review can ruin my breakfast, but never my lunch. And I think that's
the way
true.
You see it?
Unfortunately for me, I don't even eat breakfast, so
you're not bothered. But I would wonder whether you're bothered by this notion. I mean, it is. I said to someone today, Jay's coming by tonight. We're going to talk about the program and talk about the book. And he said to me, God, he said, I don't think he's comfortable with this sort of the way he's been characterized as a sort of spokesman for a generation. And he's never was very comfortable about being somehow part of the brat pack, as he was mentioned at the time. And all of that was stuff written about you in the 80s. And we're now in 1996. And then he said to me, what would be interesting is to know how he compares the 90s literary world with the 80s literary world. And when I think about that line of questioning, it seems to me that this is stuff that I'm not sure that you think about much. My impression of you is that you're mainly somebody who's saying, I'm looking for a story that I want to tell. Yeah. This one is about friendship, and I put it out there, and maybe I'm being prejudged for what I was, or maybe I'm a better writer than my books are, or whatever you may be saying.
I don't think about it until I put a book out there and suddenly become the subject of a lot of commentary again. I think one of the mistakes that almost everybody makes is, assuming that there's a sort of think tank here planning my career moves. I'm just sort of waiting for a voice in my ear to get me going again on another story, and it's not these books are not written with my image in mind.
How is this place now that different from now that you've spent half of your time here, and now that you are at a different place in your life? How is this city different and the literary world different?
Well, you asked me earlier about the 80s versus the 90s. One of the things that I don't personally miss about the 80s, but that I miss for the culture, is that as much crap as there was in the art world, in the literary world, as much sort of heat as opposed to light, there was a sense of excitement, in the art world, in the literary world. Artists and writers suddenly really mattered and were even stars. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people feel that this wasn't a good thing, but I can't help thinking it was a good thing, that people were actually excited about novels, about paintings.
You don't find that now?
Well, I don't find it. There's still literary circles, artistic circles. There's still gallery openings. There's still poetry readings. I just find it's not quite as general. In other words, there's not the intersection of you know, the popular awareness and the cultural elite is not as open as it was. There's not quite that sense of buzz that there was in the 80s. On the other hand, it may be that, you know, this is a better environment for serious work to be done.
You've said once that an interesting thing, you talked about Doctorow, in some sense that you saw it writing fiction like he saw it, in a sense, and you use this analogy of driving at night and the headlights. You're constantly moving down the road, and if you could only see to the extent of the headlights, that was fine. Yeah, because you'd get there eventually.
We were talking about outlines, and I interviewed Doctorow once, and I asked him if he outlined, because his books seem so carefully structured.
Right.
I just thought maybe he did. And that was his analogy. He said, no, he just was driving along in the dark.
And it made sense to you?
Yeah, it made perfect sense to me. I can't imagine outlining. I wish I could. Fitzgerald outlined, one of the few good writers I know who really, it's not true. John Irving. Faulkner does too. John Irving is a big outliner. I wish I could, but I find the most interesting things happen in the process of writing, and whenever I try to anticipate, whenever I try to kind of outline a story, as I did with this, it changes along the way.
Jay McInerney, The Last of the Savages. Thank you, buddy. Great to see you.
Thanks, Charlie.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.